World War III, thankfully, never happened, but many movies and video games have given their own interpretation of what it might actually look like. Welcome to Chaos Gaming, everybody. Today, we're going to be checking out 10 of the best World War III games, say that 3 times fast, of all time. Make sure you guys are following the page, turn those notifications on, share it around, and let me know which of these is your favorite. Let's start off with a really good one that not a lot of people talk about. Frontlines, Fuel of War. Raise your hand if you remember this at all. This was one of the most underrated games from the Xbox 360 era, and I felt it was worthy of a shout out. Released in early 2008 for the PC and the 360, Frontlines is a multiplayer-based FPS that showed a global conflict between the Western Coalition, led by NATO, and the Red Star Alliance, led by the Shanghai Pact. Now, the year's 2024. We're almost there. That's crazy. Following an energy crisis and a global pandemic. That's weird. Now, the gameplay was similar to Battlefield, but it had an emphasis on the front line, which is where the fighting took place. And a major part of the game was trying to control the front line and push it into enemy territory. So fighting on the front line puts you more at risk, but it also helps push the overall objective forward. It was a cool game, had some really good ideas, but due to it coming out right when COD and Battlefield were starting to dominate the multiplayer shooter market, well, it went unrecognized. The servers were shut down, unfortunately, in 2012, but you can still play on it. You can at LAN, at least. If you manage to get some buddies together who want to experience an underrated gem, go for it. Next up is Defcon. Anybody remember this one? Defcon was a real-time strategy game developed by Introversion Software and published in 2006. It actually had a few different names. In North America, it was published as both Defcon and Defcon Everybody Dies, while in Europe, it was tilted and made Global Thermonuclear War. That one's kind of crazy. Regardless of how you named it, Defcon was a pretty interesting game. You played from the war room during a massive simulation of World War III. It's up to you to strategize your attacks for both traditional and nuclear weaponry, destroying enemy territory while also protecting your own and trying to keep the civilian casualties at a minimum. Although, this is nearly impossible once the nukes start flying in this game. Defcon is a very realistic portrayal of battles like this, and it's definitely worth a try if you're a fan of super high-stakes RTS games. And speaking of strategy games, how about Tom Clancy's In War? This is one you probably saw in the GameStop bargain bin. Yeah, it's often remembered as one of the lesser Tom Clancy games, but it was still a solid experience. In War is a real-time strategy game that simulates a possible third world war. Following a nuclear terrorist attack in Saudi Arabia, the world falls into this massive energy crisis, which eventually spirals into an all-out military conflict for control of Earth's remaining resources. Sounds like every World War III movie we've ever seen. The game got good reviews, but it didn't sell well. After all, RTS games aren't exactly big sellers on consoles, so while the PC version did good, the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions, well, they found themselves in the $5 GameStop bin rather quickly. If you've ever played In War, you probably know it's a good game, and while the gameplay isn't anything mind-blowing, the story was good. It was, and it's an intriguing prediction of the future. I think you can still find this on Steam if you want to give it a go. Next up, Battle Shark. Now, unfortunately, this is not a game about sharks fighting each other. Instead, it's an old-school arcade game from 1989. It's actually pretty fun. Battle Shark has you playing as a submarine pilot in the middle of World War III as you zip around, blowing up enemy ships and using a periscope to acquire your targets. It was a ton of fun. It's a simple game, and it was one of the most financially successful arcade cabinets of the late 80s. Unfortunately, it's pretty hard to play the game today. I mean, you could play a port of it as part of the Tato Games collection, I think, or something from 2005, but other than that, you're probably not going to be able to find it. Next up, I played this. Command & Conquer Red Alert 2. Another RTS game. Now, there have been quite a few based on this topic, and Red Alert 2 is probably one of the best. Released for the PC in the late 2000s. It was developed by Westwood Studios and published by none other than EA. You commanded troops in a fictional World War III, and it actually had a pretty unique premise. In this game, Hitler never came to power, and instead, the Soviet Union was the one trying to conquer Europe in World War II. They were stopped by the Allies, but then a while later, the Soviets regroup and catch the United States off guard by invading the mainland through Mexico, which kicks off World War III. So from that point, it's up to you to push them back and try to defend the U.S. while defeating the Soviet Union. I mean, Red Alert 2 was it was acclaimed and commercial success. Many people consider it to be the best in that franchise, and that franchise is huge. Now let's get into some familiar territory. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Now, the Modern Warfare series is usually about trying to prevent World War III from happening, but in MW3, everything went off the rails and the fighting started. Released 10 years ago as the conclusion to the original trilogy, MW3 shows the world in a global conflict after a group of Russian terrorists managed to manipulate the world's militaries into trying to destroy each other. The campaign, excellent. It tied up all the loose ends of COD 4 and Modern Warfare 2. The multiplayer, I mean, it was hated upon release due to how similar it was to Modern Warfare 2, but today, it's remembered as one of the best. Then you had the extremely underrated Spec Ops modes, which lets you do fun time trials, score attacks, all kinds of cool stuff. Survive endless waves of enemies, and then survival mode, it was fun. Modern Warfare 3 was a fan favorite game, and it's one of the best-selling titles in the entire COD franchise. Another one you're probably familiar with, Battlefield Bad Company 2. Are we ever going to get Bad Company 3? I don't know. Now, Bad Company 2 isn't technically a World War III game, but it's pretty close. Released in 2010, it told the story of a fictional second Russian-American war, and the U.S. was facing off against Russia with the help of a Latin American militia. Now, Bad Company 2 made waves for its incredible engine that allowed for more destruction than we had ever seen at that time in a multiplayer game before, and while a lot of people don't remember the campaign, it was really good. You guys should go give it a try if you haven't. Let's stick with Battlefield. One more. Battlefield 4. Now, Bad Company 2 wasn't technically a World War III game, but Battlefield 4 was. Plus, many people consider BF4 to be the best game in the entire franchise. Released in late 2013, it had a horrific launch due to EA rushing it out the door to compete with Call of Duty, but once it was patched up, it was arguably one of the best. In the game, you're fighting in the War of 2020. That's crazy, where the US and Russia are on the verge of war, while China is also on the verge of joining in on Russia's side due to a military takeover by a new admiral. You have this gigantic showdown between the three biggest militaries in the world. Battlefield 4's campaign, to me, is underrated, but the multiplayer is where most of the action is, and it's deserving of all the praise it gets. The graphics, the destruction, the settings, the weaponry, the vehicles, it was all epic. Battlefield 4 sold tremendously well, and it still has a decent player base to this day. Now, the question is, will Battlefield 6 live up to the legacy? I've got my fingers crossed. At number 2, everybody, Red Storm Rising. Based on the Tom Clancy novel of the same name. Red Storm is a simulation game from 1988. Yes, it was released on the Commodore 64, the DOS, and the Atari ST, and the Amiga, if you guys know anything about those. You played as the commander of a hunter-killer submarine trying to complete various missions around the globe during World War III. The game follows the novel pretty closely, which is somewhat rare for Tom Clancy games, and the gameplay, it was designed by gaming legend Sid Meier. Now, Red Storm Rising is often considered to be the best Tom Clancy game of all time, but many people forget about it due to its age, which, that's sad. If you can manage to find a good download of this game, check out Red Storm Rising. It's a great game, and it's one of the best in the Tom Clancy series, even if the visuals don't age well. Don't judge it by the visuals. And at number 1 today, Arma 3. One of the most popular PC exclusives in the world, and it's remained that way for 8 years. Released 8 years ago, it's a military simulator. You play in the year 2030 while NATO has been losing its power to a new coalition called CSAT, led by China and Iran. Now, the campaign will have you traveling around the world, dealing with smaller scale conflicts, civil wars, and stuff like that, while the multiplayer has you enjoying some of the best, most gorgeous landscapes known to gaming. It's a gigantic game, and it dives completely into the simulation aspect. There are multiple open worlds, with the biggest one, I think it's around 100 square miles, while the smallest is like 10 square miles, and all of the environments are photorealistic. Arma 3 is one of the most played games on Steam, and it's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. So, if you want a more atmospheric and less explosive World War III game, Arma 3's got it covered. Plus, it's one of the most detailed games you can get your hands on right now. And there you have it, my friends. Those are 10 of the best World War III video games. Let me know if you've played any of these, which one is your favorite, and I'll see you soon.